Can we start with the numbers, please? How many people do we know are infected by Omicron, and how many are being hospitalised at this moment?
So what we know, hence the concern, is that 1/3 of infections now in London are Omicron. We think that obviously the reported tests are indicating about 1,600 cases, but of course the number of infections in the community would be a multiple of that, up to 10 times that. We know that it is highly infectious, so the doubling rate is between 2 and 3 days. So very quickly, Omicron will be the dominant variant in the United Kingdom and probably the rest of the world. We've seen this movie before. We saw it with Kent variant, then of course Delta. One of the obviously advantages we have is we've got a very large capacity for testing and of course genome sequencing, hence why we know so much. We also know, and I can confirm to you this morning, that there are cases in hospital with Omicron. We've been able to test people who are in hospital over the past 2 weeks. And so there is a lag to hospitalisation, but the risk of a highly infectious variant, even if it were, as many people quite rightly think, because some of the data from South Africa is suggesting that it is less severe, even if that is true, well, if you get to 1 million infections, because you understand exponential growth. So if by the end of the month you're at 1 million, with 3 days later you're at 2 million. Yep. And if it's half as severe as Delta, let's say only 1% end up with serious infection and hospitalisation, that's still 10,000 people.
Still a big number.
It's a huge number.
You were the vaccines minister, and the government, to be honest, has played a great deal on your success on the rollout and pinned its strategy entirely on the success of vaccine. What do we know about the impact of the vaccines, first, second and booster jab, on Omicron?
So you're absolutely right. We've answered the first question, is it more infectious? Yes. The second question, do the vaccines work? Well, we know now, and some data was published over the last 48 hours, that 2 doses of either Pfizer or AstraZeneca are not enough. They only protect to about 30%, AstraZeneca even less than that. But a booster does raise that protection back up to where we were when we got to equilibrium between vaccine efficacy and Delta. And we need to get back to that. So this is going to be a national endeavour. We need to vaccinate with a 3rd jab, the booster jab, so important, all those people who become eligible, all adults, because it is now a race between the booster and that protection and the Omicron variant.
Well, you've already made the point, exponential growth can be astonishing. What are you going to do to boost the spread, the booster jab, as it were? We can't presumably carry on with the same process as we had before we discovered Omicron. The administration of boosters is going to have to be accelerated pretty dramatically. What's the plan?
So there is absolutely a plan, and the Prime Minister will be saying more on this. You will know that the NHS are already making preparations from Monday for the 30s, the 30-year-olds, to be able to come forward after their second jab, after 90 days, so 3 months after your second jab, to get your booster. We are mobilising the old team, the frontline, GPs, community pharmacies, military, across the board, volunteers. We're asking people to come forward and volunteer. You can go on and join the volunteering army on the National Volunteering Service website. It's really important. This is a race. Genuinely, I say
you can increase the number of people who are putting jabs in arms, but what are you doing about providing more access? Essentially, we're up to whatever it is, 16 million or something like that in the boosters. Presumably, you've got to get into the 30 millions, the 40 millions very, very fast.
Yeah, so we're over 20 million already, and you're absolutely right. It is now a race to get all adults who are eligible for their booster jabs to be boosted as quickly as possible. And the Prime Minister will be saying more about this later today.
All right, look, the other side of this is what the Prime Minister's been saying, that you are imposing restrictions in order to slow the spread and give us time. On Tuesday, the Deputy Prime Minister was saying that there were no further coronavirus restrictions required beyond what you'd said last weekend. And the former Prime Minister, Theresa May, was cheered by Tory MPs when she said, we've got to learn to live with COVID. Now, within 24 hours, situations turn completely, and there are going to be new restrictions. First of all, what is it that happened in that 24 hours?
So let me just be clear. As Patrick Vallance said at the press conference, we are transitioning this virus from pandemic to endemic, but there are big bumps in the road. And this is a big bump, a huge bump in the road, in the sense that we now have a variant that is so infectious that it will dominate and, of course, exponentially grow. So back to what we were talking about. So let's do a mathematical exercise for a second. Right, you get to 1 million infections by, say, end of December. Right, 1% is 10,000 severe infections that could be in hospital. 3 days later, it's 2 million. Right, 3 days later, it's 4 million. Right, 3 days beyond that, it's 8 million. Right, that is the risk, that even if it's milder, say by 50% milder than Delta, the numbers are huge. It's a small percentage of a very large population. That is the big difference. So the reason we're taking these proportionate, I think, precautionary measures, the most significant of this, by the way, that scientists tell us is the work from home. That will have the greatest impact on slowing down Omicron. So hence why we've had to take these measures. I think they are proportionate, they're precautionary. The really important thing is for the whole nation. This is going to be a national endeavour, Trevor, right? A national endeavour to boost the nation as quickly as possible so that we control Omicron and bring back that equilibrium that we had with the virus as we continue to protect the economy and, of course, on that journey towards endemic from pandemic status.
Is the move to vaccinate primary school children part of this race against the spread of Omicron?
So there's no plan at the moment to vaccinate primary school children for the reason that the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation is still looking at the evidence as to what level of protection that would offer those children. Of course, we vaccinate the 12 to 15-year-olds at pace. It's great to see, at school in East London the other day doing the pupils, but also managed to do some of the teachers and parents who hadn't even had their first or second jab. Really good. We're seeing it all over, Home Park in Plymouth, staying up till 2 a.m. vaccinating people. So the important thing is to boost the most vulnerable. That is absolutely the priority.
But surely the important thing is, the most important thing, given what you said about the terrifying spread and all the rest of it, is to stop the spread of the infection. And SAGE scientists have warned that the children were the drivers of adult infection in the summer wave last year. So surely we need to do something about that.
So really excellent question, which is why we obviously begun, as soon as we had permission from the JCVI, to vaccinate 12 to 15-year-olds, because you saw a spike in secondary schools on that. If you think about exponential growth, which you and I just talked about, this is so infectious. The best way to slow it down is to keep people working from home, for example, keep adults apart. Mm-hmm. But at the same time is just protecting the economy, hence why it's proportionate. We're trying to do everything in these new measures to keep the economy open, keep it running, protect businesses, because that also does a lot of harm to people's health, mental health as well as physical health. The important thing is you want to protect the most vulnerable, because that ultimately, even if it's less severe, it will put the most vulnerable in hospital.
But surely one other thing that you ought to be thinking about here is mandatory vaccination.
I don't agree with that, and I tell you for why. We have very high levels of vaccine positivity in the UK, probably highest in the world. All the data suggests that, whether it's the ONS or other surveys, 90 plus% of all adults say they've looked at the information, they're protecting themselves, protecting their communities, protecting their loved ones. So to now play into the hands of the anti-vaxxers. By the way, I understand people who are hesitant, and it's right that we focus and give them information. But the anti-vaxxers will say, you see, that's why they're now doing this stuff. Actually, the right thing to do is share information and have this national endeavour now to really protect. It is a race, Trevor, and we've got to now drive hard for the next couple of weeks to protect the most vulnerable.
All right. Well, look, the success of that national endeavour depends to a large extent on the leadership of the government. So let's talk about leadership. 18 months ago, Dominic Cummings, Barnard Castle. 12 months ago, Prime Minister's aides, partying, and Prime Minister himself. By the way, who knows how many Christmas parties? 1, 2, 3. Prime Minister himself hosting a quiz night. Everybody's breaking the rules that you set for the rest of us. So let me repeat what I said to one of your cabinet colleagues earlier on this year. Why, when you tell us to show restraint, to be part of this national endeavour, should we pay the blindest bit of attention to you guys?
So the first to say on that is that actually the nation has been brilliant at following the guidelines. Brilliant.
That was before they knew what you guys had been up to.
All the time. Even yesterday, people were queuing up at vaccination sites, walk-in sites, or booking their booster jab. That's a great thing, and I am grateful to people doing that, and we thank them for that. On parties, the Cabinet Secretary has an investigation, and his investigation can take him anywhere to look at all parties. I have to say to you, you just mentioned the quiz night and that picture today. What do we see in that picture? We see a Prime Minister on a virtual quiz night for 10 to 15 minutes to thank his staff, who, by the way, had no choice but to come in every single day. Let me just finish this point, right? Sitting in his office with the two people who are closest working with him, no alcohol on the table, not drinking, right? On a Zoom call or a Teams call, on virtual call, respecting the lockdown rules. Many people would have had similar Zoom quiz nights around the country.
Yeah, and they would have been nicked for it. If I had done it, I would be in monster trouble.
But because you went on a virtual...
he get to do it?
Because you went on a virtual...
he was sitting next to two people within social distancing.
They are in his office. They work with him.
And that was work, was it?
No, hold on a second. When all I'm saying to you is the Cabinet Secretary is going to investigate everything. But that picture, in many ways, I've had emails from constituents because the hype around parties that was going on in the last week and the week before, right, made it sound sort of completely different. And actually, I think people will look at that picture today, and the Daily Mirror has been leading the way on this, and will think, hold on a second, he's on a virtual call, no alcohol, thanking his staff for 10 minutes before he goes back to his work. Is that really a
Let's not get too
crime?
stuck on the one photograph. Let us remember how this issue started over the last 2 weeks. It started with the allegation that there were parties and several days of the Prime Minister and other government spokespeople saying, oh, no, there were no parties. That's the problem, isn't it? It's not that, something might have happened, that could have happened in any office. It was that when the government was asked, did this happen, we were told point blank, they didn't happen until you've had to admit they did happen. In your own department, you fessed up straight away.
So let me talk about my department and then talk about your question. On your question, the Prime Minister said, to the best of his knowledge, there were no parties. He didn't attend any parties. He also said that the rules were followed, and you saw that in the picture today. It's a virtual Zoom call, not anything else. And I think the nation will understand that now, because the hype around it was these parties, where people were mixing and lots of drinks were flowing, is not there. As far as my department...
When you say the hype around it, are you saying they didn't happen?
No, I'm just saying to you...
You're not coming in here and telling me they didn't happen.
I am not. I'm saying that the Cabinet Secretary will investigate all those allegations. He can go anywhere with his investigation, and that will happen, and he'll report rapidly on this. As far as my department, when I found out that there was a gathering where people came together in the canteen who'd been working in the office because they couldn't work from home, where the previous Secretary of State wanted to thank them, then we apologise because actually upon reflection, in hindsight, it shouldn't have happened. But it's the right thing to do, is to come out and say, look, this is what happened. People were working at their desk. They brought their own drink in and were sitting at their desk, but then it was felt it's better to go to the canteen to maintain self-distancing, to thank them
Mr. Zahawi,
for their endeavour.
This is exactly my point. You did that by contrast to your boss. And my question to you really, I mean, we've known each other for some time. My question to you is, do you feel any sense of shame that you have to sit at a cabinet table with people who seem willing to say anything and do anything other than to admit the truth, as you did within 24 hours?
So, again, I'm going to repeat, the Cabinet Secretary will look at any allegation. His investigation can go anywhere, and he'll report back. And then I will come back on this programme and be answerable for that report. But let's step back a second, right? I feel very proud that this Prime Minister actually set up the Vaccines Task Force, bought 400 million plus vaccines for the nation. We've got enough supply for the booster, which we now know, and if he hadn't made a decision to spend the money on the additional Pfizer doses, we would not have the booster campaign today.
But
I feel very proud we're the first country to open up and to maintain that opening of the economy. Keir Starmer wanted us not to open the economy. Imagine the damage that would have done to people's lives.
I'm going to let you say all of that, but let's be honest with each other. All of that may be true, but he has essentially squandered that credit, because now, when he asks people to do things, the doubt about whether we can trust his word is immense. Surely, even you must admit, this is not, irrespective of the politics of it and all that, this is getting in the way of tackling that terrifying threat that you have described earlier in this interview. We need to move fast, and every day that people cannot trust the Prime Minister is costing lives. You must see that.
Well, as I was saying to you earlier, actually, if you look at the evidence, people have been very good at understanding how to protect themselves, their family and their community. They've been very good at following the rules, hence why we were able to reopen the economy and do it so successfully. We're now asking them again to be cautious, to be careful, proportionately,
and to trust you.
And to race towards the booster.
You.
Well, to trust their government that managed to deliver the most successful vaccination programme in history, and, of course, reopen the economy so rapidly. And, by the way, spend $407 billion protecting jobs and livelihoods.
All right, let me give this one last go. They sent you out this morning with a brief, frankly, to defend the indefensible. Is it time to admit the Prime Minister, who you've supported all along, in, I think, the most honest and open way, is it time to admit that you supported him in part because he's an election winner, but he's now become a liability?
I don't agree with that. I worked very closely with Boris Johnson. I worked with him when I was Business and Industry Minister with the Vaccines Task Force, and then when he asked me to do the vaccination deployment programme. He works literally all hours to make sure we get through this pandemic. The number of decisions I've seen him make, including making sure we had enough vaccine, making sure we have the fastest vaccine deployment programme, and he will make sure again that the booster campaign is going to be a national endeavour. He is doing a serious job at a serious time for the nation. And actually, if you look at the hype that's been going on for 2 weeks around parties, I'd reverse the question and say, are the media, you said earlier before we went on air, little things keep us busy in the media, right? Are you really getting a right balance here in terms of, Omicron is such an important variant that we have to deal with versus talking about a Zoom call where he was motivating his team who had to work every day without having to, they don't have the ability to work from home.
I've been counting. We spent the first 50 or 60% of this interview talking about Omicron.
You did.
So I'm not burying you with trivia. Look, let's deal with something that could be real. You could be back in here next Sunday after a Conservative defeat in the by-election at North Shropshire. Are you still going to be telling me in that situation that Boris Johnson is the right leader?
In North Shropshire.
No,
Neil Shastri.
After he loses.
Well, Neil Shastri-Hurst is a doctor who's been vaccinating people himself. He is an incredible asset to the political landscape in the United Kingdom, and I'm confident that the people of North Shropshire will see that and will actually support Neil Shastri-Hurst on Thursday, and he'll be returned as our
and
member
next
of
Sunday
Parliament. And if he doesn't, I will be back on your programme, but I am confident that actually when you look at what Neil Shastri-Hurst has done in his life, he is an excellent member of Parliament for North Shropshire.
And Boris Johnson? Still be.
Boris Johnson
right leader.
will be focusing on that national endeavour to boost the nation. It's a race against time.